Radoslaw Sikorski is the deputy Polish Prime Minister, and he gave a little speech or an address to everyone in an emergency council meeting that had been caused because Russia had encroached on some airspace and, transponders off. Planes decided to fly about for 10, 12 minutes, I think he said. And of course, this is just part of the war that Russia wages with the West in general, just continually kicking sand at them and poking them and just playing war games. And it looks like the countries around Russia have had just enough of all of these little games that Putin is playing. And this was the speech that was delivered by the Polish Deputy PM.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Radoslaw Sikorski, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, this Emergency Security Council meeting has been called because a mere week after Russia sent drones into Poland, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders off entered Estonian airspace without authorization and lingered for 12 minutes. On the same day, 2 Russian fighter jets violated the security zone over the Polish drilling platform in our economic zone in the Baltic Sea. If these were accidents, why not immediately acknowledge them and apologize? We have given Russia a pass in the past in such circumstances. But we have not heard any apologies, only lies. Together with the intensification of attacks on Ukraine, they seem to be an eloquent comment on, quote, moving from confrontation to dialogue, end quote, promised by Vladimir Putin in Alaska. These breaches of airspace are suspect because they are an escalation of hybrid war which Russia has waged against the West for years. Murders of politicians, journalists, human rights defenders and defectors, cyber attacks against hospitals and financial institutions, arsons, including in Poland, UK and Lithuania, postal packages containing incendiary devices all over Europe, including Germany, attacks on Ukrainian embassies, in addition to standard espionage and disinformation. Excellencies, this Council has a responsibility to send a clear message that such provocations will not be tolerated. It must stand in solidarity with Estonia, Romania, Poland, and all nations whose sovereignty is threatened by systemic Russian aggression. To the representatives of Russia, I have this to say. We know you don't care for international law and you are incapable of living in peace with your neighbors. Your insane nationalism contains a lust for domination that will not cease until you realize that the age of empires is over and that your empire will not be rebuilt. Every drone strike by the heroes of the armed forces of Ukraine, may God bless them, brings this day closer. Your 3-day special military operation can't even conquer Donbass for 10 years now. But the potential for criminal, catastrophic Russian mistakes is still there. By ordering mobilization in 1914, you precipitated the start of World War I, which bled Europe white and led to your Bolshevik revolution. By signing the Hitler-Stalin Pact, you helped launch World War II, the bloodiest in history. By Sovietizing Central Europe, you caused the Cold War. Don't start another one. We are peaceful democracies who have studiously avoided actively joining your attempt to reconquer Ukraine. But we will not be intimidated. I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned.
Now, the first point to note as I was sitting listening to that excellent address was the level of gravitas that the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland was exuding there, the seriousness of his tone, the direct, threatening, murderous message which was hovering just below the surface. I thought that was exquisitely done, and it made me think of our leaders in Britain. And I thought for a moment there, would it be possible for Keir Starmer to deliver something like that? And the answer is no, because Keir Starmer is about as tough as a muffin, in my opinion. And can you imagine either the disposed Angela Rayner or Bridget Phillipson or Lucy Powell delivering anything whatsoever remotely like that? The answer to that is no, not at all. You know, we live in an age where people ascend through the ranks and they achieve these top jobs through a certain level of ruthlessness. But in times of trouble, people will always look to their leaders and look for strength. And this man exuded it, this Sikorski exuded that level of strength there. And, you know, it's lamentable, I think, that many of our leaders, and even, you know, cheeky chappy Boris with his hair all messed up, and, you know, Theresa May trying to be the Iron Lady Mark II. I mean, generally speaking, is it any wonder that, you know, the rest of the world is looking on Britain as a spent force? I mean, we can't even communicate strength from, you know, the microphone, never mind actually having it behind us in our armed forces. And I think that was demonstrated perfectly there, and it kind of annoys me that we've allowed these people to run our country who just don't deserve to be there and aren't powerful enough or strong enough as human beings to carry the roles with sufficient gravitas as this gentleman done there. And isn't it funny that Putin likes to come out and give addresses, and he likes to give people history lessons? And so Sikorski there decided to give Putin his own history lesson, you know, covering the world wars, covering the Cold War, covering, you know, the death that surrounds the Russian hierarchy for whatever reason it is. There's something within Russia, within, you know, the top of the tree, however they decide to promote their people from within, that just courts death. You know, forgetting about the gulags, just how much death and destruction they've brought to Europe generally. And I think we all needed reminding of that fact right there. And, you know, just reminding us of the insane nationalism. You know, Putin thinks he's in an age of empires and yours will not be rebuilt. I mean, this was a very, very direct message to Vladimir Putin there. Like, if you want to go, then let's go. Send your jet over our place there, and if we get to shoot it down and that jet falls on NATO soil, then it really is game on, buddy boy, and then we're going to get to see who really is the hard man. And that was essentially how he delivered that speech, and I thought it put it across perfectly. Earlier this week, President Trump made the remark that on average since the start of the war, there's been about 7,000 people killed every single week. And of course, they are mainly young people. They're now pushing older people into the war. And, you know, whatever we may think of Zelensky and the Azov battalions and all of that stuff going on in Ukraine, without a doubt, it's Russia that is pushing all of this stuff along, and it's Russia that doesn't appear to want peace, and it's Russia that keeps having a go and going on manoeuvres with all of the countries beside it. And at some point, are they going to make a mistake? I don't know. It would be my guess, and of course I don't know the mind of a psychopath in Vladimir Putin, but it would be my guess that he doesn't want NATO to enter this war, because if NATO does enter this war and he makes a mistake and, you know, they get to join in, then I think that's the end of Russia's involvement in Ukraine. And at that stage, would the NATO forces just allow things to go back to the status quo? I don't think they would. I think Putin has proved himself to be a warmonger to the people of Europe, and nothing less than the removal of Putin would do if NATO did get involved, and that would be one of the conditions of peace, you feel, that Putin would have to go in one way or another. And within that, the questions start to bubble up to the surface. How much control does Vladimir Putin have over the top hierarchy of the Russian military top brass? Are there people around him that would want to get rid of him, because you'll have created a bad situation and walked past a deal where they could have taken a certain part of Ukraine and walked away? All of these questions are all up for grabs. But the other thing that needs to be considered, and by far the most deadly thing that needs to be considered, is the potentiality for small-scale tactical nuclear weapons. And of course, all of this is a massive worry. And at that stage, at the business end of proceedings, if you have a psychopath and you have NATO and all of Ukraine and all of the Russian forces and everybody involved in what's going on, then we would enter a very, very dangerous time, you feel, particularly if Russia's on the back foot, and particularly as the NATO forces would be approaching the border to Russia. Moscow is very close to that border, and if that were to happen, if that would be the case, then that would be an extremely dangerous and worrying part of the war. And let's hope, no matter what happens, that Europe itself can somehow negotiate its way through this. But who knows what Putin will do when he's backed into a corner. And very few people would understand his mind, because Vladimir Putin is a psychopath. Thanks very much for your time.